245 LGBT children's books published in 1 year. Biblical Worldview books on the same topic? Dozens. The other side has thousands of books targeting your children from birth. They're organized, funded, and in your child's school right now. So today I'm going to show you exactly what is happening and exactly what we are going to do about it. So stay tuned. Hi, and welcome to One Little Candle, a weekly podcast where we provide you with valuable content that will ignite your faith and empower you, believer, to make a difference in your own little corner of the world. I'm your host, Rebecca Berschwinger. In each episode, we tackle various issues that impact our faith and the world around us, like spiritual warfare and cultural issues. You'll also meet some amazing guests who stop by from time to time to share their inspiring testimonies, all with the goal of equipping you to be a shining light in a dark world, no matter how small your sphere of influence may seem, because even the smallest actions can have a profound impact. Remember, all it takes is one little candle to dispel the darkness. So what do you say? Are you ready to let your light shine?
It's the light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Well, hello, and how are you today? I am the host of One Little Candle podcast, Rebecca Berschwinger. Thank you so much for joining me today. Whether you're returning or this is your very first time, so very happy to have you. So, how are things, my friend, in your little corner of the world? I pray all is well with you. And if it's not, know that as a believer, God is close to you. He's there for you. Okay. Been crazy busy here, a good kind of crazy, and I will touch upon that toward the end of this episode. But yeah, garden season is in full swing. Summer weather is here. I'm happy about that. But I want to talk to you today. As you know, this is June, and it is what we now know as Pride Month. And so, of course, I like to post episodes regarding that subject from a biblical worldview. And today I want to focus on books, children's books specifically. And more specifically than that, children's storybooks. Because I have some stats and some numbers for you that are going to shock you. I know they shocked me when I was doing my research, and they will shock you. So as I alluded to in the pre-clip of the show, roughly 245 LGBT-themed children's books were published just in 1 year, okay? And the biblical worldview books on the same subject in the dozens. Let's talk the actual scale. So currently in print in the United States, there are over 275,000 children's books, and those come from about a little over 20,000 publishers. Now, over 184 million children's fiction copies are sold annually in the U.S. alone, okay? That's 1 in every 4 books that are sold in America. They are children's fiction books. Now, how do I know this? Well, I got my numbers from something known as the CCBC, and the CCBC is the Cooperative Children's Book Center. And what this is a government and a university-funded library in Wisconsin that tracks what children's books are being published, and then it recommends which ones should be bought by librarians and teachers across the country. So they're the ones producing the statistics that I'm citing. And of course, as you can probably already figure, they operate out of a progressive diversity framework that it counts LGBT representation, but what it doesn't do is count biblical worldview representation at all. Okay, so as I said, it's a government-funded entity, so you and I, the taxpayers, we're paying for this. We're helping to provide them money that they use to track and promote one worldview while ignoring another. and also to help keep those books on shelves even when parents object, okay? But what they found in their tracking is, well, in 2017, this CCBC tracked 136 children's books with LGBT content. By 2023, so 6 years later, that number grew to approximately 245 books published pro-LGBT in a single year. So that's 7% of all the children's books that are published. And I told you there are over 275,000 children's books currently in print in the U.S. right now. All right. Now, Goodreads, I'm sure you've all heard of Goodreads. They list over 380 books in their curated LGBT children's literature list. So that's just a sample. But you ready for this one? Between May 2022 and May 2023, 6.1 million LGBT fiction books were sold. That is a 173% increase since 2019. Yeah. So remember I said that 7% of all the children's books published were pro-LGBT books. So if you take those numbers, you apply that 7% figure to the broader market, well, the numbers become enormous because at that point, potentially tens of thousands of LGBT-themed children's books are in circulation, and they're being pushed into our children and grandchildren's hands. Again, biblical worldview books, as far as we know, in the dozens. Now, why am I saying as far as we know? Well, let's talk a little bit about the tracking because this is important. It does matter. Organizations, again, like the CCBC, that track children's book diversity are academic institutions and library associations. They want to be diverse, and their definition of diversity includes LGBT representation, but here's where it's not really diversity. It doesn't include religious or biblical worldview as a category even worth tracking. And yes, tracking matters. What's tracked gets recognized. What gets recognized gets funded, and it gets pushed. So we have the people who are doing the counting, even deciding what gets counted. So right now, biblical worldview on the subjects of gender, marriage, race, all these things, they are not on their list. So that is institutional bias in plain sight. There is no equivalent conservative or Christian institutional body with the same academic credibility or funding or even, research going. Okay. And so these books are being, these advocacy organizations, LGBT advocacy organizations, they have specifically funded research, they have tracking, and they have promotion of these books, and they've had this for decades. So this is why people are much more aware of these kinds of books than they are of any biblical worldview books on that same subject. And two, I might mention, when parents find out about these books being on the shelves in the schools and in the libraries, and they decide to rightly push back, the CCBC actively coaches librarians on how to resist those efforts. Okay? They help to keep those books on the shelves even when parents object. So, in essence, yes, there is a huge chasm of a publishing gap, but let's look at the spiritual reality of this and know this for what it is, and that is it's a worldview battle. And what's happening is children are being shaped by stories before they can even think critically. Okay, are you all familiar with the verse from Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. When he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, let's look at the first part. Train up a child in the way he should go. We are to do that as Christian parents, right? We're to train them up biblically. But the question is, really, who's doing the training? And right now, in much of the world, not just this country, someone else, people with the anti-biblical worldview, are the ones doing the training, especially within the public school system. So the fact that we have no centralized tracking for biblical worldview books, that alone tells us a story. Now, let's talk about these biblical worldview books. Where do they come from? The few that we know of? Well, most content comes from small Christian publishers, homeschool curriculum makers, self-published authors, such as me, or parent-guided curriculum. That's mostly what exists, like the Learning About Sex series and God's Good Design. And those are good. Those are helpful. But what the other side is getting to our children and grandchildren through are storybooks, picture books. We don't have a whole lot of that on our side. We don't have a whole lot of that. But this gap is significant, and it's growing. You have to remember these people, too, they have the backing of major publishers. There's a publishing group known as the Big Five, concentrated in New York City, and they control the vast majority of the U.S. book market, like Penguin Random House, HarperCollins Publishers, Simon & Schuster, the Hachette Book Group, Macmillan Publishers. They rule a lot of the children's publishing world, and again, they lean progressive, unfortunately. And maybe you're thinking Scholastic Books. Well, Scholastic Books is a big thing. They're not part of the Big Five, but they most certainly are a publishing giant of children's books. For those of you that have followed me for a while now, I did an expose of Scholastic Books back in 2024. I think it was for Pride Month. You can go back and find that episode on my website. But while doing my research of Scholastic Books, I found over 140 LGBT-themed books available on their website for children as young as, birth. All right, 0 years as they call it, right on up through high school and young adult. It was awful. And actually, they also had a lot of books on the occult and witchcraft, and sometimes they even meshed the stories together, homosexual, transgender characters involved in the witchcraft. So, not good. Mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, not good. They're very organized. They know what they're doing. They make these books, especially when you look at the Scholastic book site. Their books are colorful. The illustrations are colorful, engaging. The storyline's engaging. They've got these wonderful sounding titles that just draw children in. And I went to a book fair too when I was a child. I loved the book fairs, and I would ask mom and dad for money for them, and they would give me some money so I could go pick out a couple books. When I got home, though, when I walked through the door with my books, I couldn't wait to read upstairs in my bedroom all by myself. Because my parents didn't say, hey, let's see the books you got, or let's read the books together. Nope. I don't even think they asked. And I'm sure, especially with all of today's distractions going on in modern day households, many children don't get asked what they brought home from school. And so they're upstairs, unbeknownst to the parents, reading things that are very damaging. So, numbers-wise, we have a huge problem, don't we? What do we do as Christians? Those of us who know that God's design for marriage between one man and one woman, His design for permanently fixed gender, the Bible's view on race, and I'm talking counter and critical race theory. What do we do, those of us who embrace God's truth? Well, I'll share a list at the end of what you can do from your own little corner of the world. I'm going to share with you today what I have done. All right. Some of you may be familiar with this, but I have started something known as Love and Truth Books. I have authored several children's books, children's story books. What they really are parent resources disguised as children's books. These are not the kind of book that you just give to your child and say, here, go read, Johnny. Nope. Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, you read them to them with them. And in the back are some parts, especially for the grown-ups, to provide them with helpful resources and a way to continue the conversation. Really what these books do is to help kind of broach the subject. And my books start at the age of 3. The first book I wrote was called Celebrate How God Made You, and that is about God's wonderful design for permanently fixed gender. Now, there may be some of you, because one of the podcasters whose podcast I was on, when we're talking about these books, at first he was shocked when he saw ages 3 to 7, especially as young as 3 and 4. But here's why. Here's why I am starting young. Because they are. Why? Why are they starting children pushing LGBT at such a young age? Well, here's why. The strategic answer is this. They know how children development, because child development research is something that's well established. And of course, the other side knows it well. Now, the early years, ages 0 through 7, those are the years when a child's foundational beliefs, values, and their sense of identity is formed, all right? So what children absorb in those years, well, that becomes the lens through which they interpret everything that comes later. And of course, we want them to screen everything through a biblical lens. So starting early isn't accidental for these people. It's strategic. The psychological answer is this: normalize before critical thinking develops. Because children under 7, they don't yet have the cognitive ability to think critically or to evaluate these competing worldviews. They simply absorb what they're given as normal. Okay? That what they're being told is normal and it's right. So by the time a child is old enough to reason through these ideas, well, that foundation's already been poured. All right. They call it, sometimes they call it the pre-critical window. So that's exactly why storybooks are the chosen vehicle. A child doesn't argue with a picture book. They just receive it when they see it, when they hear it. Right? So that's a psychological answer. Now let's talk about the culture, because they want to change an entire culture. So the cultural answer would be this. For them, it's capture the next generation. And by the way, they're doing a very good job at it. Every ideology, no matter what it is, that wants to reshape a culture understands, obviously, adults are much harder to change than children. There's a man by the name of Antonio Gramsci, I don't know how to pronounce it. But what he was a Marxist philosopher. And a lot of his ideas pretty heavily influenced the modern progressive movements. And this man wrote extensively about the need to capture cultural institutions like schools and media to reshape the next generation. See, they're patient, okay? This is sometimes called the long march. It's a long march through the institutions. And so what we're seeing in children's books now, because that long march has been going on right under our noses, Christians. And so now we're seeing the fruit of that strategy playing out. Okay? Lots of it. Because, and I'll talk about that in a bit too. So we also have what you could call the practical answer here, and that is the distribution channel. What is that distribution channel? Schools and libraries. They know that children spend more waking hours in school than almost anywhere else, a lot more time than with the parents. And of course, public schools and our public libraries are funded by taxpayers. And unfortunately, they're governed by people who, in many cases, they've been trained in progressive ideology. They sneak them in there. So once you control what books are in schools and what books are in the libraries, you have a direct pipeline to every child. And guess what? That direct pipeline is there regardless of what parents believe at home. As I said, Scholastic book fairs, as I discovered in my research, they're a perfect example of this pipeline in action. All right, what's the answer spiritually? Okay, because ultimately, some might boil it down to politics. No, it's not about politics, okay? from a biblical perspective, which is how we Christians live, this is spiritual warfare. It's spiritual warfare. We would do well to remember Jesus' words in Matthew 18:6. He said, "If anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea." And the enemy's always targeted children. Children are the future of the world. They're the future of the family, the church, the culture. So if you can disrupt a child's understanding of God's basic created order, if you can disrupt their understanding of gender, of sexuality, and identity, you're going to disrupt their ability to understand who God made them to be and even what the gospel means for them. And this is why I always say my mantra for Love and Truth books is get there first. Get there first, because it's easier to instill a strong biblical foundation to begin with than to have to try to come along later and try to undo the damage, the deception, the lies, the confusion they're experiencing, the lies they've been told. And see, this is why I even started to write books, because it was back in, I think, 2022, or maybe 2021, I think, I began seeing families and children. These are families that claim the name of Christ. Their children claim the name of Christ. And I see people, and it happened in my own immediate family. It happened with friends. It happened with friends of friends, children of friends, children of family members, succumbing to LGBT ideologies, gender dysphoria, homosexuality. And I thought to myself, what is going on? These are Christian households. Shouldn't they know better? Shouldn't we know better? And so I started digging a little bit. And the more I dug, the more I learned. And I saw that children in Christian homes didn't know how to articulate why they believe what they believe. That is huge, my friends. You have to be able to explain the why as to the what you believe. They were not equipped. Neither were a lot of the parents, unfortunately. I think biblical illiteracy has a lot to do with that. So they didn't really have the proper biblical lens to screen things through. And so I thought maybe we need to come together, like-minded people, right? Believers, come together, educate and empower ourselves so we can do the same for our children. Realizing and knowing, because I've seen several of the books, I've heard many of the lies that usurp God's design for marriage, God's design for gender. These lies are cleverly crafted because they're demonic. Satan is very clever and he's very patient. And they look like truth. They sound virtuous. They sound truthful. And if I didn't have the biblical lens to screen them through, I would probably think the same thing. So imagine little children and how vulnerable to these lies that they are. And so I thought, let's read some books. Let's, of course, dig into scripture. There are a lot of wonderful books out there, and I have those books and those resources and the links for the ebook versions in the back of these children's books for the parents. But I thought I could get a community together within our community, within our church, the church I was going to at the time, not the church I am in now, and come together and save our children. Guess what? Couldn't really interest people. Why? Well, some of the answers I heard were, well, we're a Christian family. We don't need to worry about that. I don't think it's going to happen to us. My children, they already know better. And another classic one was, we'll talk about that if it comes up. Well, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, by the time it comes up, it's usually because your child is struggling or even with the help of the schools, has quote unquote changed their gender, or is in a homosexual relationship, or has serious doubts about what you've told them because they've been indoctrinated. So by the time it comes up within the family, in other words, what I'm saying is they've already been shaped. They have already been indoctrinated. There's already a problem. You don't wait until it comes up. And some families think naively that this subject is never going to show up at their door. Guess what? It's not a matter of if you're going to have to deal with these issues. It's a matter of when and whether or not your child will have a strong biblical foundation when it happens. All right? So I went on to do like they do and write children's books, because starting at age 3, it's essential, not just appropriate. It's essential. I'm not introducing these topics too early. All I'm doing is responding to a battlefield that was already chosen for me. I'll say it again. The question was never whether the children would encounter these ideas early. The question is whether they'd have God's truth to stand on when they did. All right, so briefly, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my books. I have 4 of them officially published. 2 more will be coming out on God's design for marriage. It's going to be called The First Wedding, How and Why God Created Marriage. And there's 2 different age groups for that, a younger and an older age group. I am just waiting on an illustrator. I have an illustrator for those 2 books, so they will be published hopefully sooner than later. Another book coming out called Free to Be Me, and that is a story about a bunny that wants to be a fox. And yes, that is, without going into gender-specific issues, it is still about how God designed you is a permanently fixed way. And so that's told through story. But yes, celebrate how God made you, ages 3 to 7. He helps young children find joy and contentment in the gender God gave them. And what it does is draw us from Genesis 1:27. Guides children to understand that being a boy or girl it's not an accident. It's purposeful. It's a beautiful gift from a loving creator who makes no mistakes. And so these books are great for Christian families, for Sunday school, homeschools, children's ministry. All these books are wonderful for that. My next book is How Does God See Me and How He Wants Me to See Others. That is for ages 5 to 8. And this book helps young children discover what God values most. And of course, that's a kind heart and good character. It's not the color of our skin. All right? It teaches little ones that every person is fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image. They're equally worthy of love, dignity, and respect. Because we're in a time when children are being taught to see the world through the lens of skin color. But this book, How Does God See Me? Well, that offers something better. It offers a biblical foundation that teaches children to judge others by their character and to love others as themselves, and reminds them we're all part of the same race, the human race. So this is a counter to the damaging and divisive critical race theory that is circulating now. And I wrote another book I have for ages 10 to 14 is Forever Written in the Sky, The True Meaning of the Rainbow. And as you know, the rainbow has become one of the most widely misused symbols in our culture. And so this book helps children understand the true origin and the meaning of the rainbow. It talks about God's covenant with humanity so that when they see it displayed in the context of celebrating a lifestyle that contradicts God's design, they're going to recognize that misuse for what it is. So the goal isn't to fill kids with confusion or anxiety when they see a rainbow, but just the opposite. I want them to have peace, to have comfort, clarity, and it always bring them back to God, God's word. Every time they see a rainbow, it's a reminder of God's faithfulness, a reminder of his promises and his unchanging nature. And so this book is filled with a lot of good pictures of actual rainbows, beautiful scenery. So yes, it talks about where they see these rainbow symbols in reference to pride. It talks about the flood, why the flood happened, and the very first rainbow that appeared to Noah and what God said about that and the covenant he made with the earth. And it talks about a little bit of the abuse of the rainbow, but it also instructs the child to pray. And here it says this, I'll read you a page from it. There are many that abuse God's rainbow. They use it as a symbol of the celebration of what God's word clearly calls sinful. And so we should pray that the rainbow would instead point sinners to Jesus Christ. We should pray that they will seek God's forgiveness and realize his grace, mercy, glory, and patience. And this book has, again, resources for parents. I have scriptures to back these things up. I have a glossary. This book contains a glossary, and they all contain scriptures that go with the themes of the storybooks. This book and my fourth book about Israel, you all know how I feel about Israel, also has a glossary with it, and it's scripture rich as well, and resources for parents. This is called Israel Chosen and Cherished, Equipping Families to Love God's Chosen People. Now, anti-Semitism, we know that it is really rising at an alarming rate across America, not just America, the world. And there's a lot of children, including Christian children and adults, they have little to no biblical foundation for understanding Israel and the Jewish people. We have replacement theology, which I can't figure out for the life of me why, when scripture is so clear in so many places. But replacement theology has crept into many churches. But scripture tells a completely different story. Okay? And to me, replacement theology is what Paul warned us not to be, and that is arrogant against the branches that we've been grafted in with. But this book, Israel Chosen and Cherished, it gives families a biblical, Christ-centered foundation for understanding why Israel matters, why God's chosen people matter, and how Christians are called to respond. And so what I'm hoping to do in younger children is counter the rising tide of anti-Semitism that's happening, to help you, mom and dad, have conversations with your children about God's covenant people. So yes, it's written from a Christian Zionist perspective. They need to know standing with Israel isn't something political. It's biblical. All right? It's biblical. And this is for ages 4 to 8, and it's filled with a lot of wonderful pictures of Israel. And there's also a prayer in here that a child can say for Israel, and there's some fun facts in there included. So yes, those are my books. You can get them on Amazon. If you look for Love and Truth books, that'll take you to all my books that I have written that are available on Amazon. Israel is available in ebook form on Kindle only. I have a link on my website, loveandtruthbooks.com. There's a link, if you visit that website, that will take you directly to any of these books that you want to buy, including the book about Israel. Look, get these into your hands. Get these into the hands of families who need them. I'm not saying this for sales, because guess what? I've invested more in them than I get back, because it's not about the money. It's about getting them into as many hands as possible. So please, that is something you can do, not for me, but for them, mom and dad, grandparents, for them. Share about the books. Spread the word. I'm sure there's people that would appreciate them as gifts. If you don't have young children at home or grandchildren, they make great gifts. For a homeschool group, you might know, to put in the library at your church, whatever. So yes, those are available. I've had the privilege of being on several other podcasts and radio, FM radio, to share about my books. I was even invited, this is a big one for me, for those of you who are familiar with Brave Books. Brave Books are also answering through Storybook against LGBT, against God's design, any anti-biblical worldviews that are being pushed at the children. Brave Books has responded as well. They have, thanks to Kirk Cameron, a See You at the Library Day. Well, I was invited to read one of my books at a local library in October. So very happy about that. Now, let's get to what you can do. I shared with you what I did, but maybe you, and pray about this, please. Please pray about this. What can you do? Because I think we have to have a call to action here, right? I told you to find Love and Truth Books. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram as well. Perhaps you write books yourself, or you have this nudging to write a children's book. Pick up the pen, even though we don't use those anymore. I'm old school. Get writing. Get writing. You'd be surprised at what you can do. You really would. But we need Christian authors to write and publish more books. And with Amazon and Ingram Spark, it makes it a lot easier to do it today. The barrier has really been removed. You don't need a publishing company. You can self-publish. You can become an indie author, your own books through Amazon, KDP, or Ingram Spark. All right? So yes, we need more children's authors because story is powerful. Illustrated picture books, we need to meet children where they are. All right? The other thing is to fund the infrastructure. If you're a Christian foundation or you like to donate, you're a philanthropist, you could specifically fund a children's publishing imprint. Sponsor book development, even large churches, okay, any organizations, sponsor book development, help people get these books distributed, published, all right? Distribution demand. Actively request these books at your local library. Libraries will stock what patrons ask for, but you have to be persistent. All right. So support Christian bookstores, support online retailers. Get on Amazon. There's a lot of people trying to get their books on Amazon. We need to organize. Organize like the other side has. We can create dedicated nonprofits that are focused on biblical worldview children's literature. Develop award programs to elevate quality titles. Build curated reading lists. Distribute them through churches and homeschool networks. I know there's moms on Instagram doing that now, and I will be reaching out to them pretty soon about Love and Truth books. And here's a biggie. Mobilize the church. Churches should create children's libraries stocked with these books. I think it's a great investment. What about children's ministries in your church? Incorporating biblical picture books into Sunday school. You can read the kids a good book. It doesn't always have to be curriculum. Pastors, recommend specific titles from the pulpit. Parents, they need to know and hear that these things exist and that they have a resource to go to. Social media is big. We need to leverage that. The Christian parent communities on social media, they're a lot. They're massive and they're engaged. Short video read-alouds from your favorite book. Do that on social media. Reach out. Engage the homeschool market. They're large, they're organized, and they are hungry for this content because most of them, they have their kids out of public school for a reason. Homeschool conventions, curriculum fairs, partner with these people, get those books out there, help people to see them. Help people to see those books. But I have a bigger vision for Love and Truth books. It's going to be, and I already have 2 other authors on board besides myself. And that is for Love and Truth books to become an author network where like-minded, biblically minded Christian authors who write children's books can come under this umbrella. We network, we cross-promote one another. We become organized. Visibility. So if you are a children's book author and you're hearing this, or you know one, please contact me. You can leave a message on my website, onelittlecandlepodcast.com, or at www.loveintruthbooks. It's LOVIN truthbooks.com. That domain will eventually be changing to the name Love and Truth Books, which is the name of it, the company. But for now, it's www.lovintruthbooks.com. You can also reach me at candlestogether@gmail.com. Or if you happen to follow me on Instagram as Love and Truth Books or One Little Candle Podcast, you can also contact me through direct messaging. So, yes, these are things that we can do to protect our children. Look, we've got to at least give them a fighting chance. They don't have one if they're not equipped. They start young. We need to start young. Okay? But I got to tell you, I've come up against a lot of obstacles in trying to get visibility. I hear, oh, these are great books. These are great books. And I have people that I know and within my church, they're buying them. They're reading them to their kids and grandkids. But also, I've also tried reaching out to people for reviews, sending them a free PDF of the books that take maybe 10 minutes to go through. If you're thoroughly going through it, maybe 5 minutes. And write up a paragraph on Amazon. Because these, by the way, are what gets seen. And I hear promises to, but people don't follow through. So even simple things, it's hard to get. I understand it. We're busy. There's a lot of distractions out there. We're trying to eke out a living. We have people, especially if you have children at home, they're pulling you all kinds of different ways between the job and I get that. We're busy. But really? 10 minutes? Writing up the review? A half an hour total. That's it. It's that simple. But if we can't do that as Christians and come together on behalf of the children or support those who are maybe on the front lines trying to fight this battle, how are we going to fight it? How? We're not. Who pays the price? Our children, our grandchildren. That's who pays the price. So if you want to check out more about this, I was on Street Talk Theology. I recorded a week or two ago. This Saturday, it airs on Grace FM Radio in Casa Grande, Arizona. It will be coming out on the Christian Podcast Community's website, christianpodcastcommunity.org. That is who I am proudly a part of, One Little Candle. So you can listen to it on Street Talk Theology there. And I also did a guest appearance with my boss, Andrew Rappaport, on his podcast called The Rap Report on Christian Podcast Community. That should be airing soon. And, okay, this is a Christian book on Israel. I was on the podcast Inspiration from Zion with host Jonathan Feldstein, an Orthodox Jew. And I was able to share about the book Israel Chosen and Cherished. So keep an eye out for those if you'd like to hear more, a little bit slightly different conversations going on there. Anyway, okay, so yes, that is it for today. Books, all about books, children and books. That is the vehicle they are using. That is the vehicle we need to use, amongst other things. Of course, families within the homes need to talk about this. We need to be in the Word ourselves and with our children. If we're not in the Word ourselves, if we're not biblically grounded, we don't have that strong foundation, we are not going to be very helpful to our kids. We cannot give them what we don't have. All right? We can't. Well, let's talk song for this episode. I do have a great song. And, what I'm asking you to do is to help protect the children. Protect them from the darkness. And so there's a song, of course, on YouTube called God Protect My Children. And it's by the Christian Music Project. I will leave the link to the song in my podcast show notes. Please have a listen. I hope it inspires you and maybe even convicts where needed. So I think we all need that from time to time, right? Okay, coming up in another week, I will have a 2-part episode with my interview with Laura Perry. Well, she was Laura Perry when she wrote the book From Transgender to Transformed. She spent several years living as a man or trying to live as a man, but thankfully God saved her from that. So she's just a wonderful, wonderful person, Laura Perry is. And she's now happily married to a wonderful man. Her name is actually Laura Perry Smaltz now, but she's married to a man by the name of Perry Smaltz. So yeah, his first name is her former last name. But please have a listen to that episode. She tells about her story. And God is good. God is amazing. God is patient. But she's one of the many who was blessed enough to realize that her gender could not be changed. No matter how many hormones she took, no matter what she had done to her body or surgeries, no matter what name she called herself, she was still Laura. And so thank God. We thank God very much for that wonderful woman. So yes, please have a listen to that episode coming up next week. So be that one little candle, be that light in the darkness. There's several ways you can do it from your own little corner of the world, right where God has you planted. And of course, it always starts in your home. Start in your own home, in your own family, and then in your community, your church, wherever God has your sphere of influence, wherever that is, be that light in the darkness. It just takes a little bit of light to dispel that darkness. Educate yourself, then you can educate others. When you're empowered, you can empower others. Again, buy the books. Whether you buy the books for yourself, for your family, whether you give them away, or whether you find another avenue that I mentioned, please, whatever God directs you to do, that is what you do. All right, my friends. Again, as I said, follow me on Instagram as One Little Candle Podcast or Love and Truth Books. Check out my website, onelittlecandlepodcast.com. Subscribe to my monthly newsletter. Freebies come your way. You can have the know on upcoming things and just further be encouraged if you subscribe to my newsletter. Thank you so very much for joining me today. You have a blessed day. And until next time, you take care and God bless.
This little